I think that, we've got some questions about nominees like Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, that the senators are going to ask. That's not going to be a pro forma exercise, and we'll see what comes out of that.
With just a couple of days until the inauguration of Donald Trump, all eyes are on the states and on the Senate for the next couple of days. Senators have got the power to confirm or reject Donald Trump's cabinet appointments. And I suppose you could say this is the first real test for his incoming administration. The hearings start tomorrow, so we thought we'd look ahead in the company of Joseph Sternberg, who's an editorial board member at the Wall Street Journal. So, Joseph, good afternoon to you. Is this a formality or will it be pretty tough?
No, it's never a formality. I mean, I think that this is, sort of one of the signs that the American system is working, because the Senate does actually take this advise and consent responsibility very seriously. So I think that, we've already seen, some nominees, particularly Matt Gaetz, who had been the original nominee for Attorney General, dropped out of that process because it became clear very quickly that he was not going to be confirmable. I think there have been other instances where it might be rare that the Senate outright votes against a presidential nominee, but that is because if the nominee is running into opposition and it's clear that they would get voted against, they won't make it that far. So I think that, we've got some questions about nominees like Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, that the senators are going to ask. That's not going to be a pro forma exercise, and we'll see what comes out of that.
So if, for example, Pete Hegseth doesn't get approved, what will happen? Someone else will just be shoehorned in and then they'll have to go through a Senate hearing as well.
Yes, I think that typically if administrations run into confirmation problems, and again, it's not necessarily that if any of these people are going to fail, it's that they actually get voted down in a final vote on the Senate floor. I mean, the more normal pattern is that after the committee hearings, the senior senators will say to the incoming administration, look, this person is not going to make it. And then they end up getting withdrawn.
Okay.
And I think that if that happens, to Pete Hegseth or any of these other nominees, it has to be a learning process for the Trump administration. They have to think about what exactly is it that gave senators pause about this first person. Who can we nominate who will avoid that problem? And that is more or less what happened with the Attorney General pick when Matt Gaetz dropped out of that. They ended up finding a nominee who has, considerably more prosecutorial experience, Ms. Bondi, and that nomination seems to be moving forward.
I would assume, perhaps wrongly, that Marco Rubio, that will not be too problematic and he will get approval. Are you thinking along the same lines?
I would think that that is going to be one of the easier ones to get through. I mean, there's been a bit of a palaver in the media over the past few days about whether there are disagreements between Marco Rubio and Elon Musk on China in particular and what that might means in terms of who has Trump's ear. But I think that, again, this is an issue where, if Rubio goes to the Senate, I can't imagine a scenario where he would not be confirmed because the senators know him. And this isn't necessarily a matter of it being an old boys club or, they just confirm their own, but it does mean that they have actually met him, interacted with him. They have an idea of, kind of a serious policy thinker that he is and would be comfortable giving their consent for that nomination.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned Elon Musk, of course, and he doesn't have to go through this process. He might have huge influence, but he's not involved here.
Yes, that's true, because I think that presidents do have the scope to bring some advisors into the White House who are not subject to the confirmation process. But another important point about the U.S. system to keep in mind here is that although we're talking about the cabinet level appointments, the cabinet secretaries like Treasury or Defense or the Attorney General, there are several layers below those people who also will have to be confirmed. So you're talking about hundreds, if not, a thousand or more officials over the next few weeks and months who do have to go through this process, who populate the top levels of the administration. So the Senate actually has a very powerful role in shaping what the Trump administration will look like based on who they do approve for all of these administration jobs.
Some of Donald Trump's critics are saying that he is prioritizing above all else loyalty to him in these picks. And I guess Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is very much in that category, isn't he?
Well, I think that, the Senate will presumably have questions for Kennedy in the way that they will for anyone else, probably a lot of questions about his views on, various of the issues that his agency would have oversight of. It's interesting that, a bunch of the other nominees in that health and regulatory sphere, particularly Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's been nominated for senior role in science administration and research, probably going to be less controversial on Capitol Hill. But again, I think that loyalty to the president isn't necessarily a disqualifying feature in this or any other administration, because the fact remains that Americans did elect Donald Trump to be the president. That means that they want him to have some scope to enact his policies. And I think that, America's constitutional system with an unruly Congress put some checks on that, but it's not an inherently bad thing for a president to want cabinet officials who are on the same page as he is in terms of what he wants the agenda to be.
Yeah, I mean, whatever we might think, we have to keep that in mind, don't we? The American people, they voted for Donald Trump. Just a quick word on all the mudslinging about the wildfires in California. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that this is going to be a complicated political moment because it seems to encapsulate a bunch of issues that have been swirling in the US, particularly this difference between the red state model of governance and the blue state model. And I think that Californian voters have a lot of questions to ask the mayor of Los Angeles and their governor and other officials about disaster preparedness and the way that sometimes the California or the Los Angeles governments might have prioritized some issues like various diversity and hiring controversies or climate change or net zero policy over very concrete administrative competence or disaster preparedness. And I think that I think America's federalist system provides a lot of compare and contrast because you can point to other states around the country that have to deal with various natural disasters on a regular basis and how competently or otherwise those administrations do it, and voters are going to draw their own conclusions.
They certainly are. Disturbing times, though, of course, for the residents of Los Angeles. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph Sternberg, an editorial board member at the Wall Street Journal.